As we have talked about many times over on this channel, humans are capable of some amazing feats of engineering, building everything from massive structures like dams to powerful rockets that can take massive payloads into space. It is awe-inspiring to sit down and think about what we are truly capable of. But there is always one flaw that exists with each marvel that we build, and that is the humans, imperfect and prone to mistakes, that build or operate it. Although planners may plan and captains may train for years upon years, everything can come to a disastrous end in a split second. The sea can be especially treacherous and challenging, as there are a multitude of factors that have to be taken into account that don't exist on land, and one lapse in judgment or one miscalculation can result in millions of dollars lost. Even worse, it can result in the loss of human life. From container ships to cruise ships, here are 5 expensive mistakes that were made at sea. The MV Wilhelm Gustloff was a German armed military transport ship that operated during World War II. Originally, it was constructed as a cruise ship for the Nazi organization Kraft Deutsche Freude. But in 1939, she was requisitioned by the German Navy to be used as a hospital ship. After the German advance on the Soviet Union failed, many of their troops and refugees needed to be evacuated from East Prussia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, and Estonia. On a very cold January night in 1945, while sailing through the Baltic Sea, the ship was spotted by Soviet submarine S-13. Captain Alexander Marinesco launched torpedoes at the ship, slamming 3 into the side of the Gustloff and sinking her in less than 40 minutes. Although 1,252 people were rescued, over 9,400 people died, making this the largest loss of life in a single ship sinking in history. While the acts of Captain Marinesco seemed incredibly cruel for firing on a ship with civilians, there was a crucial mistake made by the Germans. During wartime, hospital ships were to be marked as such, giving them protection. Even though the Gustloff was operating as a hospital ship, it was not marked. Additionally, it had a couple of anti-aircraft guns on board, which gave it the appearance of a combat ship. War is a horrible thing, but the German oversight to identify itself properly cost the lives of thousands of innocent passengers. Cruise ships have always been susceptible to disaster, as they are always navigating waters that are dangerous while carrying thousands of people at a time. That's why cruise ship captains undergo rigorous training, nearly as much as military captains. Being a cruise ship captain requires more than just a knowledge of piloting such a large ship. It requires having a very specific knowledge of the waters in which they sail. 2 notable disasters show what happens when captains fail to adequately navigate these areas of the sea. The first would be the Titanic. We all know the story of the famous ship that would cross the Atlantic Ocean at record speed. However, the ambition of Captain Edward Smith won over his caution for the ice fields through which he was sailing. This proved to be the ship's undoing. Second, we have the Costa Concordia. On January 13, 2012, this Italian cruise ship was sailing off the coast of Isola del Giglio in Tuscany. Her captain, Francesco Schettino, deviated from his original course and steered too close to the island in an effort to save time. Although he said that he had sailed these waters and navigated this path many times before, a miscalculation on his part caused the ship to strike a shallow reef and come to rest on its side. While it may be easy for us to make assumptions as to what we would do or not do in a situation, it really makes the term better safe than sorry more real. The easiest of decisions in either of these accidents would have been to navigate in a different area. It would have saved many lives. Some of the largest ships in the ocean are container ships, huge barges that transport thousands of containers between countries. Tens of thousands of these ships sail every day throughout the oceans of the world. While they are relatively large, enough so to be resistant to external forces such as rough seas or bad weather, they are definitely not immune. Additionally, as these huge ships carry all sorts of cargo, there is no telling what types of dangers they pose in and of themselves. Take, for example, the cargo ship MOL Comfort. This ship was a Bahamian container ship that was chartered by a Japanese company. On June 17, 2012, she was sailing about 200 miles off the coast of Yemen and encountered bad weather. Suddenly, her hull suffered a crack amidships and eventually broke in two. Salvage efforts proved useless as the two halves eventually sank, along with many of its 4,382 containers. Another incident of note involved the MV Hyundai Fortune, a Panamanian container ship that was registered to Hyundai Merchant Marine. On March 21, 2006, the vessel was en route from China to Singapore and traveling through the Gulf of Aden. Around noon of that day, an explosion occurred below deck, quickly spreading throughout the ship and to other containers. Although the ship did not sink, the fire burned for several days before being contained and the ship towed to port. These disasters illustrate the importance of the shipping industry and the financial impact that can be felt after such events. With the MV Hyundai Fortune, even though the ship didn't sink and only half the containers destroyed, the estimated cost of the disaster is said to be over $800 million. The cost of the MOL Comfort was estimated to be over $1 billion as the ship itself was lost along with much of its cargo. Ships are not the only vessels that you'll find in the sea. With the oil industry being as strong as it is, many countries have oil rigs set up off the coast of their shores. These huge structures weather everything from rough seas to hurricanes, all while drilling deep below the sea floor for oil. But disasters reach a new scale when you mix technology with geology. In 2010, 41 miles off the coast of Louisiana, the oil rig Deepwater Horizon was drilling as normal when a blowout occurred. This is where a large pocket of methane gas rushed from the underground well up through the pipes, causing an explosion and fire on the rig. After burning for more than a day, the rig sank. 11 people died. The environmental impact was even more severe, with the equivalent of 8,000 barrels spilled into the sea per day. This disaster at sea came with the price tag of nearly $65 billion. Oil spills at sea are always more costly than average wrecks at sea. The disaster of the Deepwater Horizon oil rig was an example of the worst-case scenario for environmental disasters in regards to financial cost. Luckily, the environmental impact was lessened by the quick actions of the government cleanup efforts. Had things gone differently, the impact could have been worse than the 1989 wreck of the oil tanker Exxon Valdez, which released 1.5 million gallons of crude oil into the sea after striking a reef off the coast of Alaska. In that case, over 1,200 miles of coastline were affected, of which 200 miles were moderately or heavily covered with oil. The MV Dona Paz was built in 1963 as a passenger ferry that originally operated in Japan. It was a decent-sized vessel with a passenger capacity of 608. It saw good use until a fire on board in June of 1979. The fire did not destroy the ship, though. After being refurbished and built to hold more passengers, it saw regular use again in the Philippines, carrying passengers and cargo between the islands. On December 20th, 1987, the Dona Paz departed from Tacloban, Leyte, bound for Manila. Although it was reported that radio contact was made with the ship around 2000 hours, other reports have indicated that the Dona Paz didn't have a radio at all. That night was clear, but the sea was choppy. At about 22:30 hours, the ship collided with the MT Vector, an oil tanker that was carrying 1,041 metric tons of gasoline and other petroleum products. Upon collision, the Vector's cargo ignited and the fire spread very quickly onto the Dona Paz. 2 hours later, the Dona Paz sank, with the Vector following suit 2 hours after that. Only 25 people in total survived. 24 passengers from the Dona Paz and 1 crew from the Vector. Things were destined for disaster from the beginning. The estimated loss of life was over 4,300 people. Reports from the survivors of the Dona Paz showed that the crew were partying at the time of the accident, dancing, drinking, and watching movies. To make matters worse, the ship was very overcrowded, with tickets sold illegally. Although the ship had a capacity for 1,424 people, there were an estimated 4,341 people on board. Of the 24 passengers that survived, only 5 were on the manifest. Of the 21 bodies that were recovered and identified, only 1 was on the manifest. It was the perfect storm of reckless decisions. Disasters at sea come in all shapes and forms. We have to build enormous vessels to match the enormous obstacles that the ocean can throw at us. Because of these large-scale operations, the price tags for anything that goes wrong is greatly multiplied. So, countries and companies will have to continue working, training their engineers and captains to get every detail right as often as possible, thereby avoiding as many disasters as possible. Be sure to click the link on screen now to check out another video just like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.